What is the worst advice you've ever received in your life?
Don't quit your job at Walmart. You've been here for 3 years. Just 7 more and you'll be fully vested in the company.
Ugh, one thing I just remembered about that job. We had a manager who, since the time I started working there, couldn't speak above a whisper no matter how hard she tried. It had been like this for years. 2 years after I was hired, she finally found a doctor who figured out the problem. Apparently, if you're stressed out every single day for years on end, it can cause a psychogenic voice disorder. He ordered her to take 3 months off work. When she came back, she could speak normally. When I was in high school, I had a friend who was not the smartest. I remember him telling me if I didn't want to get a woman pregnant, then she should be on top so the semen can't flow up. He became a father his sophomore year.
You know, son, there's really no such thing as cheating if you aren't married. The Bible doesn't recognize any relationship that isn't bound in the covenant of the Lord. So until you're married, relationships don't really exist.
Thanks, Dad. You just indirectly explained why you're on your 3rd marriage. Had an uncle tell me that men could be allowed to fool around in relationships, as it was their impulse to have as many children as possible. And women, well, look at a man other than your husband and you're a prostitute. I have some questionable family members. I called Kids Help Phone when I was a teen to ask for advice on how to help my depressed friend. They advised I find new friends. I wish I was making this up. To clarify, the conversation was very short. I explained my friend had been struggling, depressed, and with no motivation and isolating herself from others. Along those lines, it was a while back, and I asked what I could do. The only piece of advice they gave me was, let her sort it out on her own, and find new friends. That's it. Nothing to interpret or misinterpret, I don't think. We remained friends though, and she's alright now. Get used to it, my old boss told me when my 8-hour day shift job changed to a variable 8 to 10-hour night shift. This would effectively remove me from spending time with my wife and young children. I took his advice as a catalyst to engineer the greatest adventure of my life. Transferred to a job across country, hugely upgraded my living conditions for my family. New boss completely understood the demands of a parent and adjusted my work schedule accordingly. I'm so thankful for my new boss, but I'm even more thankful for the old one, for giving me the worst advice I've ever received in my life. There you go. Kinda seemed like the first boss might have been burnt out on their own life to be that callous about yours. You deserve your best life, folks. When my marriage was on the rocks, my dad said, "Son, go out and find yourself an older woman that just wants to frick and keep your marriage. She, my wife, doesn't have to know and you'll be getting laid and the older woman will just be happy without a commitment." Thankfully, I didn't go that route and my marriage is repaired and stronger than ever today.
Oh, but the old lady who just wants to F is still lonely. Stop being so selfish.
It looks like you're using an ad blocker. Please turn it off to continue viewing this page. I mentioned in passing that my boyfriend suffered from a terrible Charlie horse in the middle of the night. My bizarre space cadet of a coworker heard this and immediately interjected, frantically explaining that I needed to get him to a hospital because this was a surefire symptom of pregnancy. She also recommended that I call the news because my boyfriend is, well, a man. I guess she thought history was about to go down. Spoiler alert, he wasn't pregnant. She also believed that cheese made outside the US wasn't really cheese. Her mindset on most issues was difficult to explain. Just have kids. You'll figure out how to afford them later. When my daughter was an infant, my wife couldn't breastfeed and my daughter couldn't digest formula very well, so I had to buy a special pre-digested formula for like $25 a can. I was at the cashier paying for the formula and the guy in front of me was gathering his things. He said to me, "When my kids were babies, I wish I knew what I know now." And I said, "What's that? What do you know?" He said, "Babies don't need formula. All they need is sugar water. All the rest is a scam." And I was like, I'm so glad you didn't know that back then. Yeah, my brother had someone tell him that babies can start eating solids 2 to 3 weeks after their birth. The coworker who told him this has 2 children. A guy at my work told me once that as long as you don't physically block the exit, it wasn't considered the unspeakable act. I had just asked how to deal with my girlfriend who wasn't upfront about her interests. Yeah, I made a note to warn all of my female friends about him. My high school guidance counselor said that I wasn't college material, and I took her advice and started the process of joining the Marines with my friends, who were also told this. My chemistry teacher at the time scheduled a substitute, personally drove me to a nearby college, and sat there with me while I spoke with admissions. Fast forward a few years, and after receiving a chemistry and chemical engineering dual degree and then going on to get a PhD in chemical engineering, I'd say that guidance counselor knew crap all. Just listen to your academic advisor, they know what they're doing. Thousands of dollars added to cost of education, an extra senior year, and a withdrawal on record. Seriously, don't be afraid to push back on your advisors if you're concerned about what they say or do. Just don't fight back. Men act like that because they want to assert dominance. As soon as he realizes you've accepted his behavior, he'll leave you alone. The hard and fast rule for any human relationship is that any bullcrap you accept early on in that relationship sets you up to get even more bullcrap in the future. Guaranteed. I have an open door policy, so don't hesitate to see me if you have any issues at all. I learned the hard way never to trust any boss or HR rep that says that crap. Utilizing open door policies is a damn good way to get fired for being a troublemaker. I'm having an issue at work. My boss is a major creep to every woman. Doesn't matter how old or young. My coworker and I were talking about reporting him to HR because they have an anonymous line you can call. However, HR says nothing will ever come of an anonymous tip because they need to be able to have your name and interview you. Otherwise, people would just be calling in fake information about anyone they don't like. Nobody wants to be the first one that steps up and has their name out there and get in trouble. I just got promoted to my dream position by him, so I definitely don't want to risk it. Yep, sadly enough, I've heard that in most American companies, the last thing you want to do is complain about a higher-up to HR. I hope that's flawed advice and that most of you find otherwise, but it's what I've heard. They exist to protect the company they work for. When I was little, I told my mom that I was sad because some kids were bullying me. She said I should tell them that when they bullied me, it hurt me inside and that they'd stop. I did what she said. This was bad advice. They did not stop. I know someone who taught her 5-year-old to tell people, "You're making me very angry." Yeah, that worked out really well. Don't go through chemotherapy, eat this nut and berry mix instead, said my younger sister when she visited me in hospital when I went for febrile neutropenia, which means no white blood cells and I had a fever. She also showed up claiming to have bronchitis and didn't wear a mask and full-on hugged me. Yeah, she's a piece of work. Even knowing what I do now about what it would do to my reproductive health, in short, permanent menopause at 26, I'd still go with chemotherapy 1,100%. I was going to die without it, with a 100% guarantee. I'd be dead by the time I turned 27. My life is more important than my ability to have children the old-fashioned way. I should clarify I was diagnosed with diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, co-classified with bulky disease, and was receiving chemo for it. The febrile neutropenia was a side effect of the treatment. Holistic people are the most fun, aren't they? This leaf from Tanzania will cure you of your life-threatening disease, and it's all natural. My psychiatrist told me I could stop taking the SNRI antidepressants I was on more or less cold turkey. It was technically safe, but holy crap, it was a tough couple of weeks. Partly because of unpleasant physical sensations and partly because it was the closest to actual crazy I'd ever felt. Buy a house in 2006. It'll be the best decision you ever make. It was the worst decision they ever made. When I found out I was pregnant with my youngest son, my mum and her boyfriend told me to abort. Not because I couldn't afford the baby or that there was something wrong with him, but because my mum was going through menopause and didn't want to be reminded that she couldn't have any more kids. Just open another credit card. It's free money. Coming from my friend who is in thousands of dollars worth of debt and has no idea she will eventually have to pay that off. Also, another gem. This same girl thought she would get a marketing job right out of college that would pay her $70K a year, and she wouldn't take anything less because she'd be selling myself short. Don't be afraid to seek help at mental health. It won't adversely affect your Air Force career. I've been turned down for 2 amazing job opportunities because of my visits to mental health. To clarify, I'm already in the Air Force. I saw mental health for depression and anxiety-related issues, and was later rejected for new jobs with the Air Force because of those visits, despite assurances to and endorsements by several providers stating that my issues had been resolved. The last couple of years of my life and career have been immensely frustrating, and it's put me in a dark place that I haven't really been able to escape since. I'm not planning to do anything stupid, don't get me wrong, but it's hard to see the proverbial light lately. I'm not giving up. I think I'm too stubborn to do that. but I've come to realize that I'm probably going to be here for a while, so I might as well make myself comfortable. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. In my final semester of college, my insanely jealous, distraught mother called me to make one last plea to get me to drop out. She went on to say, "What would you do if you had to watch helplessly as your own daughter threw her life away and became a nurse?" By the way, she married an elementary school dropout and was a bitter retail worker. She couldn't handle watching me be the first in my family to graduate from college and make something of myself, and she dealt with it by constantly shaming me. If I scored 99% on something, she complained about the last 1%. If I got 100%, she said I was stupid because I didn't earn bonus marks. We don't talk anymore, and I'm a successful nurse. As is tradition, I received the typical, "Well, I hope you still love her and talk to her. Be the better person" response that survivors of this kind of behavior often receive. If your narcissistic parents won't stop, there's nothing wrong with leaving and never looking back. Yes, even if it's your own mother. This is me being the better person and respecting myself and my children enough to not subject us to her behavior. Sounds familiar? My dad was a bricklayer and his dad was a fabric cutter. I got constant complaining every day about wasting time at school like a posh C-word ever since I was 16 and decided to do A-levels. When I left for university, he told me I wouldn't last a month. I started practicing medicine as a doctor next summer, and he still calls me to tell me all the lads I knew on the council estate have married and had kids and have their own cars. Yeah, Dad, I know I'd have my own van by now if I was a plumber. No, Dad, I know there's nothing wrong with being in the trades or the forces. It's just not for me. Nothing like holding your children back into the exact same path as you despite their dreams lying elsewhere. Keep it up, crappy parents. A friend of mine would always get me to talk about my relationships and would somehow twist the smallest things into seeming like they were really bad, and then suggest that I should break up with them, and I'd be like, "You're right, why am I putting up with this crap?" when it could have been something completely normal. Happened with 3 girls in a row, and it was always the same stuff he said, and I just snapped out of it one day and realized that I'd been the crappy boyfriend, and the reason it didn't work was because of how I was acting after hearing all of these things put into my head. I think he was just jealous because he could never get any girls, but what a weird thing to look back on. Engineer, salaried, married with kid. Also have a master's degree and several years of experience. Vice president of the company advised me to work at McDonald's after work if I wanted to make more money. He even took out his calculator and told me how many hours I should work. That guy was fired about a year after that for bullying employees. I tried to leave but ended up staying and turned down other jobs. Not a bad place to be for now. I spoke about it to a couple of senior executives I trusted at the time. The second worst advice I ever received from the same guy, he tells me, "You have to reward people for putting in extra hours at their work. Do you know how to do that?" Me, "Bonuses?" He proceeded with opening a Costco-sized bag of Fig Newtons, handed me a bag, got out of his office and started distributing Fig Newtons on the manufacturing floor. This wasn't me personally, but my mum told me that we had a neighbor that used to constantly tell my dad that life insurance was a waste of money and tried to convince him to stop paying for it. Fortunately, my dad was intelligent because he died 5 years later and my family would have been completely destroyed without it. My careers advisor in high school, when I said, "I think I want to do something with computers," she said, "Have you heard of Microsoft?" Then she wrote the word Microsoft on a piece of paper and slid it across the table, and that was my careers interview over. Out of everything, this has to be the funniest one here, especially if you apply it to weirdly specific stuff. "I think I want to do something with cars." "Have you heard of Toyota?" Then she wrote Toyota on a piece of paper and slid it across the table, and that was my career interview over. Someone told me I should have kids in my early 20s so I can just get it out of the way. Your family is the only thing that will ever be there for you, not your friends, your family. And I just got excommunicated from my narcissistic, abusive family 2 days before Thanksgiving. Anything in any romantic comedy ever. Harass the woman you want with unwanted, over-the-top romantic gestures until she falls in love with you. The part that bugs me the most is how they always make the current boyfriend or girlfriend horrible. Most of the time they don't even do anything wrong. They just aren't making their significant other the center of their universe.
Stop reading. You read too much. You're going to hurt your eyes. Go watch TV for a while.
My grandma, every time she visited, while grabbing the books from my hands, it was like something off The Simpsons. She really said that? My elders had to force me to read. The advice to have children as soon as possible. 8th grade geography exam was coming up and we'd been studying the Middle East. My father had recently returned from Africa, where someone had incorrectly informed him that Israel is technically a part of Africa. He was extremely convincing. My teacher literally said, "Jesus, we've been studying this for weeks, kid." So, take a piece of sandpaper and rough your nips up before the baby comes. A coworker to pregnant me about how to feed my kid. I don't have to deal with that eventuality of parenthood, and I'm doubled over in front of my screen in pain after reading that. "Oh, go and see Jack and Jill with Adam Sandler. It's funny," said Todd from accounting. Dear God, there are no words. Did you see it? I assume Todd is dead from having tragically swallowed his own tongue during breakfast. Stop thinking about depression. There are more people who have greater problems than yours. Non-verbatim. It's like saying don't eat food when you're hungry because someone somewhere else is starving. When people told me to ignore the bullies, you don't need to fight them, but standing up for yourself is far better than taking it, internalizing it, and letting it hold you back. My college roommate, drink beer and nothing hard when you party. It fills you up so you'll throw it up before you get alcohol poisoning, and then you can drink more right away. Don't make any friends. Friends will ruin your life. I haven't made any friends and I've ruined my own life just fine, thank you very much. When I was a teenager and had acne, none of the over-the-counter acne medicine was working. My mum brought me to a dermatologist and the medicine they prescribed me was very expensive, so before buying it, my mum searched for any home remedies online. The home remedy she found was to use urine. The way to apply it was worse. My mum went to the store to buy supplies, and for over a month I would pee into a diaper and place it on my face for 15 minutes as part of my morning routine. Worst advice I've ever taken. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, I was given a Superman cape for my birthday. I was told that it could make me fly. After a few days of not being able to fly, I began to ask people how to make it work. They advised that I needed to find somewhere high up to jump off of. So I started jumping off fences, trees, and then I was told I needed to jump off something taller. I was miserable with the school I was in and wanted to study my dream career. A friend told me that no one does what they like and I should deal with it. I didn't. I did leave and now I'm about to get a degree on the career I love. I know things will be tough, but I don't regret it. In my country, most of us are out of a job, so I figured if I'm going to be unemployed, better be at something I like. Somebody told me that girls like to be smacked around a little. Pro tip, always ask first. Schedule all of your college courses at 8 a.m., then you've got the rest of the day to relax. This works if you're a morning person. Afternoon classes were hell for me, but I loved having 8s. When you're undecided about what to do with your life and people say, do what you're passionate about or love. Well, fricking thank you, like I'm obviously not that passionate about anything if I've got to ask this question, right? I was advised to go to Bible college and to find myself a godly husband. I didn't take that advice and instead hung out at the engineering college and married an engineer. I had a friend do this. She found a godly husband, all right. 3 rehab stints later, years of physical, emotional, and verbal battering, and numerous threats, and she's just now finding the strength to divorce him. When I was fresh out of the Navy and going to college on the GI Bill, my dad tried repeatedly to get me to drop out of college. He honestly thought that pursuing a biology degree at no cost to myself was a waste of my time. It wasn't until I started my master's degree that he was finally supportive of my educational goals. He tells me he's proud of me, and when I remind him that he tried to get me to drop out, he denies it. It's funny how selective parents' memories get when you get older. They never seem to remember anything they did wrong. Just get over it, my mum, anytime I had any sort of emotional, mental, or bullying issue. Your mother was likely told this growing up, and it's the only thing she knows to say in this situation. She probably doesn't even realize it either. My high school guidance counselor told me, "You'll never make a living drawing monsters." I became one of the original artists of Magic the Gathering, created the Prototype franchise, ran various video game franchises for Warner Brothers like Harry Potter and Game of Thrones, created the Delta Green series of books which topped $440K on Kickstarter and BackerKit, These things are filled with monsters, so suck it, Miss Ehrlich. Not me, but I was there when my husband's aunts told him that he needed to be more like his cousin. Everyone knew the cousin was worthless, so it was shocking. At the time, my husband was in college and working full-time in IT, actually doing pretty well for himself, while his cousin had a job at some stadium making $12, which they all thought was great. After their little pep talk, they convinced his mum to agree. That's when I told him I believed in him and they were crazy. 20 years later, my husband is very successful, while the cousin is in prison for inappropriate conduct with minors. Seriously, his aunts were stupid C-words. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.